Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you need to understand and give you that instant, informed expertise. We cut through the noise so you don't have to.
And today, we are taking a really fascinating look at the very DNA of modern Mexican political identity.
We're looking at history, the military's role, and it's all captured in one single, incredibly symbolic event.
That's right. Our sources for this deep dive are transcripts from the celebration of the 114th anniversary of the Mexican Revolution.
So we're talking November 20th.
Exactly. And we have excerpts from a major civic military ceremony. We have a speech from a high-ranking military official, and then the response from the President of Mexico and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Claudia Sheinbaum.
Okay, so our mission here for you is to get a shortcut. A shortcut to understanding how the current Mexican government, this movement known as the Fourth Transformation, or 4T,
Right.
how they legitimize their power. And not just their power, but their entire policy agenda.
And they do it by drawing this direct, unbroken line. It's a line from the heroic struggles of the past straight to their cabinet meetings today.
It's a narrative of historical necessity.
It is. And the aha moment for you, the listener, is seeing that Mexico's current political identity, at least as it's projected by its leaders, is defined by this four-part historical structure.
Independence, the reform, the revolution.
And now the fourth transformation. They're positioning themselves as the final chapter in this long battle for justice.
And a huge piece of this puzzle is the military. We're going to see how they position themselves not as some neutral force, but as an institution literally born to defend democracy and social justice.
And we should say, this wasn't some dry, boring ceremony. The sources noted that the military officials' words, especially about the role of women in the revolution,
Yes, this is a big deal.
a very big deal. It apparently left the president herself with a lump in her throat. I mean, when you have that kind of emotional pitch, you know this is more than just a history lesson.
It's a public declaration of loyalty. It's a statement of shared purpose.
It's strategic emotion. The military is basically saying, this moment with our first female president isn't an anomaly, it is the fulfillment of our own history.
All right, so let's unpack that first speech, the one from the military official, because this was, as you said, far more than just patriotic pleasantries.
Not at all. It was framed as this deeply personal and institutional reflection
On what, specifically?
on the military's genesis, its birth, and its unwavering loyalty. But not just loyalty to a person, loyalty to the ideals that created it.
Ideals of social change and constitutional defense.
Exactly. It's an ideological self-portrait. They're establishing their core identity, and they link the armed forces directly to equality, liberty, justice, all the big ideas that define the 1910 revolution.
And there's a specific quote in the source material. They say they carry the anhelo de aquella lucha armada, the yearning of that armed struggle.
Their institutional gen. I mean, that is incredibly powerful language.
It's not just that they protect the nation. They're saying they are the living expression of its revolutionary soul.
And to give that real weight, they don't just, make it up. They invoke a specific historical figure, General Joaquin Amaro Dominguez.
Right, from his 1939 manifesto. So why him? Why is this specific quote from this specific general so important for them to use today?
Well, Amaro Dominguez is a critical figure because he's the one who really professionalized the army after all the chaos of the revolution. He wanted to build a modern, loyal institution.
So by quoting him, the current military leadership is sort of claiming his mantle.
They're claiming his mantle of professionalism, yes, but they're also locking in their ideological commitment. It's a 2-for-1. He says he consecrated his life to two things.
The revolution.
Right, because of its profundo y amplísimo contenido de justicia social. Its deep and very broad content of social justice.
And the army.
And he consecrated himself to the army. And this is the crucial part, because its ranks fought dictatorship and usurpation, and firmly conserved los principios democráticos, democratic principles.
So that's the covenant. That's the institutional promise.
That's it. The Army's founding purpose wasn't just to fight other countries. It was to fight internal enemies, people who tried to overthrow the constitutional order.
So if you're a young officer listening to this speech, the message is crystal clear.
Unambiguous. Your institution is, at its core, a democratic social justice institution. You were born to fight coups. This grounds their loyalty in an idea, not just in the chain of command.
Which, of course, provides the perfect ideological bridge to the current Commander-in-Chief, President Sheinbaum.
Precisely. Their loyalty pledge to her is framed as continuing this historical mission. It's not just following orders, it's fulfilling their destiny.
It basically makes their support for her entire 4T project mandatory by their own historical standards.
Exactly. They're saying our loyalty isn't an accident. It's required by the very principles of the 1910 revolution.
Okay, now let's get to the part of the speech that had such a huge emotional impact, according to the sources, the focus on the historical role of women.
This was a really powerful and, I think, very intentional part of the speech. He dedicates significant time to recognizing women not just as supporters, but as combatants and intellectual leaders.
Integrating them fully into the military's own origin story.
And just breaks them down into two distinct groups. First, you have the armed combatants, the soldaderas, the leaders.
And he names them. Carmen Cerdán, Valentina Ramirez, Carmen Vélez, Rose Bobadilla.
And Emilia Robles, who famously fought disguised as a man. These aren't just footnotes. They're presented as central figures.
So why is that so strategically important for the military to do right now, to name these armed women?
Because it expands the very definition of who a revolutionary is. You know, it challenges that traditional male-centric military history. It says the fight for justice required everyone, and that women were there on the front lines leading and fighting.
And then there's the second group he names, the intellectual and political warriors.
Right, the ones who fought with a pen in the voice. He names Juana Belén Gutiérrez, Elisa Acuña, and Hermila Galindo Acosta.
I mean, Hermila Galindo Acosta was a radical feminist, even by today's standards.
Absolutely. An advocate for women's suffrage, for sex education. So by honoring both the soldier and the intellectual, the military is saying the revolution was fought on all fronts. In the trenches, yes, but also in the press, in the public square. And women were fundamental to all of it.
And the speech then connects all of this directly to the present moment.
It does. It says this historical process, this integration of women, was the inflection point that allowed women to eventually hold positions of gran relevancia, great relevance.
Culminating, of course, in the first female president and supreme commander.
It's a powerful validation. The military is explicitly saying, we see this moment not as something new or strange, but as the logical endpoint of the revolution's own progressive path.
So after laying out these ideological roots, the general then pivots. He starts detailing the military's modern contributions.
Yes, and this is a very clear defense and justification for their huge contemporary role in civilian life.
It goes way beyond just combat roles.
Oh, absolutely. He starts with disaster response, which is a key part of their public image. He mentions their two big plans, the DN3E plan for the Army and Air Force.
And the Marina plan for the Navy. Can you just quickly explain what DN3E actually is?
Sure. It stands for National Defense Plan, Phase 3. It's the formal institutional mechanism for the military to step in during major civil emergencies, like an earthquake or a hurricane.
So they manage logistics, aid, evacuations.
Everything. And he cites recent examples like Hurricane John in Guerrero and Oaxaca and Hurricane Nadine in Veracruz and Tabasco. This keeps them very visible and very positively seen as a force for the people.
But then he goes even deeper into national development. This is where he justifies their massive role in building infrastructure.
And he gives specific numbers. The construction of 17 federal roads, 181 local roads in the Southeast, and the big one, building over 3,000 kilometers of railway tracks.
Which includes the massive and somewhat controversial Tren Maya project.
It does, both towards the north and in the Yucatan Peninsula.
Okay, so here's the question. If the Army's whole origin story, their gen, is about fighting coups and defending democracy, how does that square with them building tourist trains and highways today? Isn't that a massive case of mission creep?
Well, it's presented not as mission creep, but as perfect continuity. And, crucially, as a historical necessity.
How do they make that connection?
The source material shows he deliberately draws a parallel. He reminds everyone that during the 1910 revolution, what were the most essential elements for moving troops and supplies?
The horse and the railway.
The horse and the railway. They were elemento essential elements.
So the military is arguing that its current role in building rail infrastructure is just the modern version of its original revolutionary function.
Exactly. The modern train is the ideological successor to the revolutionary rail line. In this narrative, building infrastructure is a function of national security and sovereignty. It's about unifying the country.
And by having the military do it, the government can argue it's being done quickly and without the corruption they associate with private contractors from the previous era.
That's a huge part of the justification.
So to wrap up this whole military section, the speech ends with this reaffirmation of loyalty.
Yes, loyalty to the institutions, to the nation, and to their Comandante Suprema, their supreme commander.
But they're very specific about the ideal that's driving this loyalty. They call it humanismo mexicano.
Mexican humanism. And that phrase is the absolute core political philosophy of the 4T. So when the military officially adopts it as their guiding ideal, they are tethering their loyalty directly to the current administration's political project.
It's a shared commitment. It's not just a professional requirement anymore.
It's an ideological fusion.
Okay, so that sets the stage perfectly for the president's speech. The Army has pledged its loyalty based on this anti-coup, pro-social justice origin story.
Right, and now she's going to take that loyalty and weave it into this grand, epic tapestry of Mexican history.
And she starts immediately with this massive framework, right? This assertion that Mexico is unique because it's gone through 4 profound transformations.
This is the single most important political tool they have. By naming these 4 distinct transformations, independence, reform, revolution, and now the 4T, they are strategically placing their own government as the inheritor of the nation's most heroic and successful moments.
So how does that function politically? What does it do?
Well, it creates this very powerful binary. If the 4T is just the latest phase in this unbroken line of heroes Hidalgo, Juarez, Madero, then what does that make your political opposition?
It makes them the modern-day version of the bad guys.
Exactly. You can just label them as conservatives or Fortistas or representatives of the great betrayal of the neoliberal period.
Right.
It legitimizes everything you're doing by equating it with the actions of national saviors.
So let's walk through them. The first transformation, 1T, independence. She starts with Miguel Hidalgo.
El padre de nuestra patria, the father of our homeland. She calls him visionary, intelligent, the beginning of their liberty.
But she doesn't just leave it as a battle. She connects it to an institution.
She does. She immediately links that act of rebellion to its legacy by commemorating the 200th anniversary of the first Constitution of the Republic in 1824. So one key isn't just the fight, it's the legal structure that came out of the fight.
Which sets the stage for a continuous struggle over constitutional defense.
And that struggle was needed immediately. Her description of the 19th century is tumultuous. It leads right into the second transformation, 2T, the reform.
She frames it as a century of internal division, conservatives versus liberals, and national humiliation.
Deep national humiliation. She is explicit. She brings up the U.S. invasion and the loss of half their territory. Then the French invasion, which tried to install a monarchy.
So this establishes a core theme that, seems to run right through to today.
It does. The nation is constantly under siege, either from foreign powers or from internal traitors, the conservative, who are willing to collaborate with those foreign powers.
And the hero of this transformation, the man who guides them through this humiliation, is Benito Juarez.
Benito Juarez Garcia, a Zapotec indigenous leader. He's portrayed as the ultimate anti-interventionist hero. A humanista libertario who, no matter what, nunca se venció ni claudicó.
He never conceded or gave up.
Never. His legacy is the creation of a modern, secular civil state, a democratic republic secured against both foreign empires and the power of the church at home. He is a pillar of the 4T's ideology.
Okay, that brings us to the third transformation, the 3T, the revolution itself. And Sheinbaum opens the section with a really hostile critique of what came before it.
The Porfiriaco, the 30-year dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz. And this critique is absolutely central to the 4T's identity because they see the more recent neoliberal period from roughly 1983 to 2018 as its modern-day equivalent.
She goes right after historians who try to, justify that era based on the modernity and progress it brought.
She does, and her counterargument is just this forceful moral absolute. She says, no hay desarrollo que pueda justificarse si está basado en el terror.
There is no development that can be justified if it's based on terror.
Right. Or on massacres or extermination wars against indigenous people, or the sale of your national assets to your friends and to foreigners. It is a complete and total rejection of that order and progress narrative.
The focus is all on the social cost and the economic betrayal.
And that moral condemnation is what provides the urgency for the revolution and, by extension, for the 4T today.
From there, she starts to name the catalysts, the people who lit the fuse.
People like the Flores Magón brothers, who were early anarchist thinkers. And she points to the huge social unrest, specifically the big worker strikes at Canella and Rio Blanco. The system was breaking down.
And then the democratic idealist, Francisco de Madero, enters the picture.
He writes his famous book on presidential succession, runs against Diaz with the slogan, effective suffrage, no re-election, gets jailed, and then calls the people to arms on November 20th, 1910.
He wins, he restores democracy, but it's short-lived.
Very short-lived. And this brings us to that critical institution-defining moment we talked about earlier, the counter-revolution. Madero is overthrown and assassinated in a coup led by General Victoriano Huerta.
And the president makes sure to name the foreign actor involved in that coup.
Oh, yes. She includes the absolutely crucial detail that Huerta was supported by the Más Intervencionista, the most interventionist U.S. ambassador, Henry Lane Wilson.
That's not just a historical footnote, is it?
It's a foundational political memory. It's a permanent reminder that external forces have historically colluded with domestic traitors to subvert the will of the Mexican people.
Which brings us right back around to the birth of the modern Mexican armed forces.
Because nearly everyone went along with the coup, but one governor refused, Venustiano Carranza of Coahuila.
And his state Congress gave him the authority to create a new armed force to restore the constitutional order.
And that is the origin story the military claimed earlier in the day. Their DNA is from the fight against a coup d'etat. Their identity is forever linked to defending the people's rights against usurpers and foreign manipulation.
So beyond creating the army, what's the ultimate legacy of this third transformation?
It's the 1917 Constitution. Sheinbaum describes it as visionary, nationalist, just, and critically, the first in the world to recognize social rights.
And that constitution is basically the blueprint for the 4T's entire agenda.
It is. The source outlines the specific rights it established, things like national ownership of natural resources, workers' rights, free public education.
And also communal or ejido property. Can you explain what that is?
The ejido system was a radical move to return land ownership to communities, basically reversing the massive privatization that happened under Diaz. It was the concrete application of the famous slogan, Tierra y Libertad, land and liberty. By mentioning it, she's reaffirming that commitment to economic justice.
And finally, she names one more figure, Lázaro Cárdenas, as the bridge between that revolution and the present day.
Cárdenas is paramount. He's the one who actually fulfilled many of the promises of the 1917 Constitution. He nationalized the oil industry in 1938, redistributed huge amounts of land.
So he's the model for economic sovereignty.
He is. And by invoking his name, the president is signaling that her government's economic policies, especially on energy, are a direct continuation of the Cárdenas legacy and a reversal of everything that came after him.
Okay, so that's the history. 1T, 2T, 3T. The heroes and villains are all set. Now, the speech pivots hard to the present.
Right. And it does that by defining that neoliberal period from 1983 to 2018 as the fourth great conflict, a constitutional rollback.
Serving a select few private and foreign interests.
It's framed as the fourth great betrayal, the modern version of the Porfiriato. And so the 2018 election wasn't just a change of government.
It was a rescue mission.
A peaceful electoral rescue mission. The beginning of the fourth transformation led by Andrés Manuel López Obrador to restore the principles of 1917.
So what are the core principles of this 4T, according to the speech?
It's presented as being radically simple. Eradicate corruption and privileges. That's it. The claim is that by eliminating corruption, you free up all the resources you need for your social agenda.
And the claimed results are things like better worker income, less poverty, less inequality.
A path of prosperidad compartida, shared prosperity.
Okay, so now we get to Sheinbaum's own administration, which is called El Segundo Piso de la Cuarta Transformación, the second floor of the 4T.
This is the key policy section. If the first floor, under AMLO, was about building the foundation and, clearing out the rot.
The second floor is about consolidating the gains and building upwards.
Exactly. The stated goal is the consolidation of justice, democracy, and liberties to achieve the full happiness of the people.
Which sounds great, but what does it mean in practice? What are the specific projects?
Well, first, it's the continuation and expansion of all the big social welfare programs, pensions for the elderly, scholarships for students, and so on.
More schools, more universities, better public health.
And crucially, more huge construction projects with the Army and Navy. More passenger trains, more highways, more water projects.
So the military's role as a state-building partner is locked in for the future.
It is. But maybe the most radical part of this second floor is the plan to restore the social sense of the 1917 Constitution through a series of very deep constitutional reforms.
This is where the real ideological battle is, isn't it?
This is it. This is about fundamentally altering the institutional balance of power to prevent any future neoliberal rollback.
So what's the most significant reform they're proposing? The one causing the biggest fight?
Without a doubt, it's the reform for the election of judges, magistrates, and ministers of the Supreme Court of Justice by popular vote.
Wait, so people would vote directly for Supreme Court justices?
That's the proposal. It's a monumental change.
What's the thinking behind that? I mean, how do they justify it?
The 4T narrative is that the current appointed judiciary has consistently acted in favor of powerful private and foreign interests, blocking their agenda. They believe that by making judges directly accountable to the populace, you democratize the judiciary and force it to align with the will of the people.
But the criticism, obviously, is that it would just completely politicize the courts.
That is the fear, yes. That judges would rule based on popular opinion rather than the law.
And what about the military's role? Is there a reform for that?
There is. The plan to formally integrate the National Guard into the Secretariat of National Defense, Sedena.
So cementing the military's role in public security.
Formalizing it, yes. And then, on the economic side, there are reforms to recover the public character of the state oil and electricity companies, Pemex and CFE.
Which is a direct reversal of the privatization policies of the neoliberal era.
It's pure Lázaro Cárdenas, reclaiming national control over strategic resources.
And finally, making the welfare programs constitutional rights. Why is that so important for them?
Because if something like a universal pension for the elderly is a constitutional right, it becomes a mandatory expenditure. It's incredibly difficult for any future government to cut it or get rid of it. It cements the 4T's social legacy in stone.
And the president is clear, none of this is possible without the support of the majority of the people.
That's the political contract she's offering. The legitimacy for all these radical changes comes from the popular mandate. The message is, we will never separate ourselves from the will of the people.
Which implies that anyone who opposes these reforms is, by definition, going against the will of the people.
It's a very effective narrative structure.
Okay, so from that domestic agenda, the narrative then expands dramatically. It goes global.
It does. The president asserts that the mundo entero ve a México con admiración. The whole world looks at Mexico with admiration.
And this isn't just, standard political boasting. It's a statement about Mexico's new place on the world stage.
It's positioning Mexico as a model of resistance and sovereignty, not as a dependent nation. And the strength of the nation, she argues, comes from its people. She calls them a pueblo resistente, amoroso, solidario, fraterno, a resistant, loving, solidary, fraternal people.
And a big part of this global admiration is focused on the Mexican diaspora, especially those living in the United States.
Yes, and they are given this incredible official designation. They're called Héroes y Heroínas de la Patria.
Heroes and heroines of the homeland.
I mean, think about that. It elevates the migrant worker from a political issue to a national hero, someone whose sacrifice is essential to the nation.
She acknowledges their economic contribution, the remittances they send home.
She does. But then she adds this really crucial, subtle point that has a lot of geopolitical weight.
What's that?
She says, they also significantly contribute to the economy of the neighboring country, the United States.
Ah, so that's not just an observation, it's a diplomatic statement.
It's a very powerful one. It reframes the whole immigration debate. It moves it away from being a problem for the U.S. and toward being an essential, acknowledged economic contribution that the U.S. relies on. It gives Mexico the moral high ground.
It asserts the universal value of Mexican labor, no matter where it is.
Exactly. And she expands on that, saying Mexicans are among the best workers in the world, in every field, building the future everywhere. It's an incredibly inclusive and fiercely patriotic vision that unites all Mexicans at home and abroad.
And the speech wraps up with this final declaration of what Mexico is today.
Un país libre, soberano, independiente, solidario, generoso y democrático. A free, sovereign, independent, solidary, generous, and democratic country.
So if you connect all the dots from this deep dive,
you see a nation that defines itself through a continuous, centuries-long struggle against foreign intervention and internal betrayal. And the current government sees itself as the absolute culmination of that 114-year battle for social justice.
That final declaration isn't just words, it's a summary of the transformation they believe they've achieved.
And are now working to solidify on that second floor.
Wow. What a strategically dense and really powerfully organized set of sources. We've traced the military's democratic origins, we've charted the 4 historical transformations, and we've analyzed the huge constitutional scope of this current political project.
I think the key takeaway for you, the listener, is that this historical narrative is not just rhetoric. It is the operating system for the current administration.
Right. It's the why.
It's the why. The condemnation of the Porfiriato and the neoliberal period is the framework for understanding why they prioritize military-led infrastructure, why they champion social spending, why they want radical judicial reform, and why they are so fiercely committed to economic sovereignty. To understand the 4T's actions, you have to understand their version of the past.
Absolutely. The past is present and it is active. Okay, let's leave you with one final provocative thought to consider. Given the explicit institutional memory of foreign interference, specifically citing U.S. Ambassador Henry Lane Wilson's support for the 1913 coup, how does that deep-seated historical grievance influence Mexico's approach to its current diplomatic relations, especially when they're at the table discussing things like energy or sensitive trade agreements?
It raises a really important question. When Mexico talks about sovereignty, is that just a political concept for them? Or is it a direct institutional response to a historical playbook of external influence that they believe deep down is still very much active today?
A question at the very heart of this transformation. We hope this deep dive gave you the expertise you needed to navigate this complex political story. Until next time, stay well informed.